Good evening, and welcome to another edition of Conversations with Lothrop. We're very pleased that you can be with us this evening. You may remember that last month we had the new city manager, Rob DiSpirito, as our guest, and he told us about his education and his work experiences. And we knew then that we had so much material we'd like to cover that we'd do something we've never done on this program before, and that is have the guest back. And so tonight we have Rob DiSpirito, City Manager, Part 2. And we're going to talk about issues tonight. And after the break, we'll welcome any phone calls which you may care to make, and any comments you may wish to have or questions. So let's get on with Mr. DiSpirito and the issues. Before we do that, would you be good enough to give us your opinion of what the general role is of municipal government today, 1996?
Anymore, it's just to keep the lid on, I think.
Keep the lid on?
I think that can translate into primarily maintaining the infrastructure and the basic services that the citizens expect, and with the greatest degree of effectiveness and efficiency at the least cost possible. Everybody's strapped with taxes and painfully aware on all levels, county, state, federal, and I think it's incumbent upon us to do our share to try and deliver the best services possible for the least amount of money.
Mm-hmm. And that would be true generally for municipal governments everywhere, and Oberlin especially.
Yes, I think in part it's a worthy goal, and in part it's imperative from the standpoint that there are fewer resources. Mm-hmm. The dollars have dried up to a large extent over the years from the federal government and the state government, passed through federal revenue sharing, CDBG grants used to be things that cities could really count on, particularly for infrastructure needs, which tend to be the more pricey things we do, and those have clearly dried up quite a bit over the last 20 years. Cities have had to economize and also look for alternative revenue resources as best they can.
At one time, a good many years ago, I came across a quotation, and it was to the effect that the role of government is to do for the citizens what they cannot do for themselves. Is that relative today?
Well, it's funny, in some areas, folks probably believe they could do a whole lot better job than us, perhaps could do for themselves. But I think in some key areas, particularly maintaining the infrastructure, the safety services, fire and police, people really do look to municipalities to cover those bases, and there's a expectation not that we just provide them, but provide them well. And we endeavor to do that.
Well, we have a number of categories, or local issues, I would say, and challenges. And the first one I've written down is utilities, and we have three headings there. We have electric, we have sanitary sewers, and we have water treatment. You want to take any one or three of those, or how you wish? Why don't we start with electric? Is there anything you can tell us about the electric? Maybe including the new generator.
Yeah, I'll start with that.
Okay.
We've had a very exciting project that's been underway this fall for us. That's been the installation of a new 2.1 megawatt electric generator. It's a natural gas-driven generator. Generates electricity at our electric and power and light plant. We had to actually take out a wall of the old building to get the old one out, bring the new one in. And it was quite an operation to behold how they had to dismantle it, the cranes, just again, literally moving the mountain to get some of this accomplished.
The whole wall came out, I believe.
Yeah, yeah, a good part of the eastern wall had to be removed. There's a 65-year-old generator that was removed, and it served an extremely useful life. we brought in something that will be much more functional and give us the added capacity. This generator had not been running in recent years, so it actually will be a net gain to our capacity at the plant.
That's one of the original generators, wasn't it?
Yes, it is.
Plant, yes.
Yes, it is.
And we might just say the plant started operation, I believe, in 1934. So that's been in a long time.
Yes, and we're real pleased that this project has come together on time and within budget so far. We're almost there, but we'd like to continue with that trend and close this out. I think Vic Efferding as interim director, as well as his other employees, have done a superb job. We've also drawn on the expertise of AMP Ohio to provide some oversight on the project, and we've appreciated their involvement. And I think a lot of credit goes to the contractors as well, Bay Mechanical and the engineers that were involved, GPD.
And we might say that I believe the last I looked at this, we had the second lowest electric rates in the state of Ohio. Is that still true as far as you know?
As far as I know, the rates, it's tough to keep track up to the minute what's being charged different places.
We're doing pretty well.
We're pretty competitive,
yeah.
And we certainly like to be able to offer that as a benefit to the residents as well as an economic magnet where economic development is concerned. So we can speak a little bit about that later on. But
Rob, would you share with people a little bit just what AMP Ohio is?
Okay. AMP Ohio is a service organization, a confederation, I guess, of various other providers and in some cases just consumers of electric power, municipal-based, that is throughout this region of Ohio. There's a lot of expertise that can be drawn through this just through regular meetings and so forth, as opposed to always going the high-price route of hiring consultants. I think there's a lot of sharing of knowledge and so forth. And we've provided personnel to assist in projects in other places, and right now we're the beneficiary of some folks coming in to help us.
Sounds good. Sort of a consortium of municipal. Let's see, how many municipals are there in Ohio? Do you remember offhand?
Offhand, I don't remember.
I don't remember either, but there's quite a number, and we're one of the few that generate, I believe.
Yes, we're a generator. We do the peak shaving mode, which means that when there's the engines aren't running every single day, but through prior agreements through AMP Ohio and our service contracts, when there is enough of a need for an additional power boost, we're able to provide that. Our engines come online and we provide that electric service. In the meantime, being part of this network, being part of this consortium of electric interests, we are able to tie into that grid and provide electric utility service to our residents at a very affordable rate.
Because they pay us to stand by, don't they?
Yes.
And to provide power as needed into that grid.
That is correct.
And we don't know where that power goes, but it goes someplace. How many generators have we down there now?
I believe there are about 9.
9, no.
There's one that may be offline. There's one other extremely old one that was actually a generator from an old submarine.
Oh, really?
And I believe that is offline right now. But with the addition of this most recent 2.1 megawatt, we do increase our capability, and we're excited about having that as we look to the future.
And I've heard from our Public Utilities Commission people we may be looking at another new one in 2 or 3 years.
It's in the long-range plan, yes. We got a lot of costing out to do and see what's going to be affordable. It's a very expensive proposition. You're looking at $1 million to $2 million. Now, these funds are not from the general fund. The electric company is self-sustaining in that it's an enterprise fund. The revenues that are raised will go back and apply towards improvements in the system itself. And based on an analysis that we'll do of where we are financially and what our future electric needs will be, it may make sense. It's not a foregone conclusion, but at this time I can safely say we're going to look hard at it, and we may eventually have an additional generator in the next 2 to 3 years.
Is there anything you would like to say about sanitary sewer systems?
Well, we do have the advantage now of a televising system that we can use both for our sanitary and storm sewers. to detect breaks, leaks, and illegal hookups that have happened in some cases many, many, many years ago. We refer to that as influx and infiltration of particularly looking for stormwater hookups to our sanitary lines, which create a greater load, a greater stress on our sanitary plant, and thus greater wear and tear and replacement cost at the plant, as well as in peak rainstorms, for instance, heavy rainstorms, where we've got the EQ basin, the basin where it's basically an overflow capacity. We want to have that ability to minimize just the introduction of rainwater coming in, and be strictly treating what the plant was meant to do, and that's sewage.
I guess so. The problem we could put in one word is infiltration.
Infiltration. So this is also some inadequacies at the plant have resulted in, unfortunately, from time to time, sanitary sewer backups in the home, particularly on the east side. There have been some problems in the Kimberly Circle area and others, ironically, in closer proximity to the plant. That has to do with how the trunk lines and the gravity are situated. But we do have some upgrades to the plant planned. For the design is occurring this fall, and we're going to be introducing these in the spring, and we do anticipate that'll reduce the incidence of those nasty backups in the basement.
Some of them
That's intolerable, and they're intolerable.
Some of them can be. They're just not acceptable, I agree with you.
Not acceptable.
And that leaves water treatment. Anything you want to say on that particularly?
No major projects going on there. We have, this past fall, removed the river pumps. They were recently taken out of their spots, refurbished and replaced.
And we might just remind our viewers that we pump water out of the west branch of the Black River when it's possible to do so with the water flow that's there. Am I correct on that?
That is correct.
Correct me if I say something that isn't correct.
We took them out in the dry season in preparation of the winter and spring.
Now the next area is infrastructure. And I have two categories, and I think we've touched on one, and that's stormwater control. We've sort of hit that one already, haven't we?
I might add to that we've got a lot of catch basin repair. There's sort of a little forest of street barricades that have popped up around town covering these things, and we are sorry that they've been there as long as they have. What we're trying to do is tie the rebuild of these basins, these stormwater basins, into a contract that we're going to do really within the next 30 days. We've got, it was in our best hopes during the course of the summer to do those one at a time, but we just, with some manpower shortages, weren't able to get to them all. But a lot of catch basins need to be rebuilt so that we can better handle getting water off the street.
So those little wooden yellow light things on catch basins are not caused by heavy rainfall. There was actually is a reason for them being there. So.
No, they're a good place to stay away from in a heavy rainfall.
Okay, and then the other category in infrastructure, streets and bridges.
Yeah, streets I'd like to address. We are the recipient now of a hot asphalt patching machine. We received it about 2 months ago. Unfortunately, we had some bugs with this particular device and haven't been able to utilize it too much to date. But it's coming back from the factory. It's still under warranty. We've got some time left this fall to use it, so still some good weather. And I've dedicated a crew of 4 individuals to do nothing 4 days a week from the time that thing comes back until we run out of asphalt or they close the asphalt plants. I think we can get 2 solid months of street repairs in before the snow flies.
Now, are you talking about paving, or are you talking about patching?
Patching. That's patching.
That would be patching.
In addition to patching, we also have a street project online. That's Vine and Pleasant Street. We also are going to be constructing a street for the first time on Smith Street. It formerly was an alley, and that's between South Main and South Pleasant Streets. We're also going to be resurfacing Robin Park and Parkwood, and all of this should occur within the next 60 days. And those are some areas that desperately need some attention.
Yes. And that Smith Street, I understand, is going to have a base of crushed glass, recycled glass.
Yes. one of the unique projects in the state. We're going to use a mix of crushed glass cullet that came from glass that was collected through our recycling program. This glass will be mixed with the limestone, not actually in the asphalt surface itself, but in the base that underlies it. And we've done some compression tests on this glass. It's got this, the qualities that pass ODOT standards. We've got a lot of other communities taking a look at this procedure because they're interested. Right now, a lot of communities like ours have to pay to have their recyclable glass accepted at a transfer station or somewhere, just because the market isn't really there. Here's a way to actually cut the cost of one of our projects, because this, whether we use 30 or 50% of our base, that's how much less limestone we have to purchase when we do the project.
We're going to cut in a minute to our break, believe it or not. Time goes so fast on this program. But let me ask one question. Do you have anything that you could say in the way of words of comfort to Park and Grafton Street people?
Yes.
Maybe they would appreciate knowing the schedule of this long delayed project there.
I'm glad you mentioned that. This was a project that originally we were going to do a complete reconstruction on, counting on some federal dollars. We learned shortly after my arrival in May, we got an unfortunate letter saying that funding did not come through. I believe this money is staying in Cleveland for the most part. The engineering is presently being done. We're going to be doing the water lines in addition to the street work. The water line project, rather than tear up the streets this fall and leave it in that condition during the winter when the snow's down, we're going to wait until the earliest opportunity that we can in 1997, tear up the streets, put in new water lines, and then immediately proceed as soon as the weather will allow us, probably mid to late April, if possible, the resurfacing of Park and Grafton.
That will be a relief to those people, as I know they've had a long wait there. Well, we'll take a break, and when we come back, we'll start in on Parks and Recreations, and you can give us a call at 775-1635, and we'll be back in just a few minutes.
A badge of honor or a license to hate.
You're a dirtbag.
What happens when the men you count on the most are the ones you can trust the least?
You have no idea what you're up against.
Boom! Josh Brolin, Mario Van Peebles, Gang in Blue, a Showtime original picture. This month, only on Showtime. Do you believe in ghosts? Join HGTV on a journey into the world of the unusual on our tour of America's haunted houses.
There are a good many ghosts here. It's really an adventure living here.
Don't be afraid. Then, for Halloween tricks and treats for the whole family, don't miss At Home for the Holidays, Making Halloween Special, a special lineup of shows on HGTV.
Wow, HGTV is really cooking. No, I mean really cooking. Introducing All in Good Taste, a great new show that serves up fresh ideas for mouth-watering dishes, gourmet gifts, and crafts. Plus, every recipe is repeated with easy-to-follow detailed instructions. Whether it's dinner party cuisine or fabulous family fare, you'll learn quick and easy ways to make your table a showplace. We're cooking now. All in Good Taste.
Politics is not just for politicians. It's the way we get things done, and you can make a difference. First, get to know the candidates and the issues. Cable television has the programming that will inform and entertain you this election season. Then be sure to vote on November 5th.
I am pleased to join your cable system in urging you to vote on November 5th. Make your voice heard, and then watch Cable Counts for up-to-the-minute results on election night.
Welcome back. We have in captivity this evening Rob DiSpirito, and you can get in touch with him at 775-1635 if you have anything on your mind. In the meantime, let's talk about Parks and Recreations. Is there anything in parks that you would like to mention?
Well, we're anticipating getting our survey accomplished with the community, hopefully before the end of the year. This is a survey geared towards what is the most favored option of the community for a new recreation facility.
Okay, so we're moving into recreation. So we're lumping parks and recreation. Okay, that's fine. I just want
It's sort of melded together in that
yes, okay, fine.
we're doing some land acquisition analysis right now, taking a look at some sites, certainly in conjunction with the budget. Want to see that we'll have adequate funds to do some land acquisition next year, regardless of which choice the community makes towards a recreation facility. The parks themselves, we got through another year with the ballparks and the rest, and we like to work cooperatively with the townships and some of their facilities and so forth. In recreation in general, there's been a lot of talk about the Boys and Girls Club trying to form a chapter here in Oberlin, and that's something that we don't see as any kind of a threat, but actually something we would embrace, something we could work very competitively with, and would like to encourage their efforts. To a certain extent, they're in search of a facility, much like our recreation department is, and perhaps we can do something together. I would like very much for that to happen. Another project that we're looking forward to is the Rails to Trails, the bike path project. Not really the city per se, but on the ends of our 3-mile segment, the state is making some efforts to extend both to the west and to the east the existing path that we have. And
that's the Metropolitan Park system.
Metropolitan Park. My understanding is it's going to go eventually quite some distance in both directions. You might be able to jump on a bike in Cleveland and drive all the way to Oberlin, and then just continue on someday perhaps to Toledo. And that may bring some additional visitors into our town, and something, add a new facet to our bike path. For our part, next year we have a little gap most folks are probably aware of along Edison Street through the Depot Park. We're looking to set some funds aside next year to fill in those gaps, to do those sections so there's some smooth continuity, particularly with outsiders and this becoming part of a larger network. We think that might be important. But
was there some kind of a separation between street and the bicyclist or something of that sort? Or?
Currently there is no, the bike path is interrupted in the block between Pleasant and all the way over to Professor Street.
Yes.
Folks have to go, they're led onto Edison Street, have to cross South Main, and then go near the depot.
South Street,
South Street. Yes. And on to stay on an asphalt surface. For walkers, I think there's a little bit of a path that's developed, but we'd like to finish that out.
You're not going to run it right through McDonald's, so people could grab something as they want.
No, the old railroad right-of-way is still there.
And before we leave recreation, when would you see that survey maybe being made? I know people have asked about that. Any timetable yet that you could share?
Yeah, again, hopefully before the end of the year. We're doing a lot of the homework that goes into it right now, in that we want to present to people not just, it would be easy just to say which of these options or none of the above, fill in the blank, but we want to give folks some idea of what these various options will cost, translated to if City Council ultimately calls for a levy, whether it's property tax or wage tax, what does that translate to for a home that's $80,000, $100,000, $150,000? What does that translate to for various levels of income in terms of annual cost to a resident? I think that's the type of informed decision City Council and staff would like people to have the option to make, as opposed to just a wish list, a Christmas list of what would you like to have.
It's pretty safe to say that whatever we might do in the future in recreation would probably be in phases.
Yes. We're of a very modest budget. Even if the populace decides to fund this, the construction end of it, through a levy of some sort, the operating expenses are going to dictate, and that would come from our general fund, would dictate that we are relatively modest, take on one facility at a time. It may be only one we could do in the first 3 to 5 years before we look at a second facility. And even in the construction of that facility, there may be some phases. Maybe next year's land acquisition, the following year would be the beginning of construction.
One thing I think people have to remember, if I'm correct on this, that in anything like this you also have to put into your budget for future planning the upkeep of these things, the staffing of them, don't you, and so forth,
Yeah.
which is sort of a hidden cost that people don't think about.
Sure. There's quite a bit of overhead involved with the recreation facility. Typically, the costs at the gate are not recovered. Most communities don't pursue recreation facilities as money makers. It's much unlike the private sector. Access is our primary motive, not the dollar. And we want to make whatever facility it turns out to be either free or at a very nominal price, so that there aren't any segments of the community, particularly where youth are concerned, that are going to be denied access due to their income level.
Okay, let's turn to the next category. Remember, you can call the city manager and talk with him at 775-1635. We have public safety, and we have fire, we have police, code administration, and a new building department.
Okay.
Which one do you want to take? Take any one of those.
I like your order. I'll start with fire.
Okay.
We have a really exciting project the public might be interested in knowing about. Just today we sent out a press release to the media that on October 6th, Sunday, October 6th, we're going to conduct a live fire exercise at 131 North Park Street in town. This is a house owned by the college presently that's been derelict. It's scheduled for demolition due to its condition. It was really beyond renovation of any kind. That the college has very graciously allowed us to use for the purposes of fire training in a real-world scenario that's very tough to duplicate down at the department or anywhere else. We're also utilizing the police department in that. They've been actually over the last 3 or 4 weeks using the house in some non-destructive ways, rescuing, search and seizure where the police are concerned, drug detection with the canine unit with our dog.
With Sheba?
Yes. And we have, in some non-obtrusive ways, used the house. We're looking to do some smoke, some extraction and rescue exercises and ladder exercises with some controlled smoke situations on the day of the fire, and then proceed to actually take the house down. And we've also invited companies from areas such as Wellington and some of the surrounding areas, if they've got a company, to come on in and participate.
What time of the day would you say that would be for the highlight of this, would you guess?
Well, we're scheduling loosely from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. I would say it would be probably later in the morning that the actual fire of the house or into the afternoon. Play it a little bit by chance, see how the wind is going. This would only be canceled, I think, due to extreme weather conditions like high winds or a torrential downpour. But we're going to do repeat that exercise on November 11th, obviously on a different set of structures.
I was going to say a different house.
Not at the same house. We're going to be out at a location at the point at 511 and Route 20 there, and there'll be further information about that one. We haven't exactly firmed up that date, but the public is welcome to come and observe. We'll keep them at a safe distance, but it might be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to be there to watch fire crew in action in a situation where you know that they're relatively safe and there aren't
They're far enough there away from other houses, so
there are no houses on either side of it. There is a house across the street. We have notified the neighbors, and we've also complied with any Ohio EPA permits that we've needed. There was a number of things we had to do. But again, we extend our appreciation to Oberlin College for this opportunity. And I think it's beneficial for them, too, and that it would cost them money to otherwise demolition the house.
When I was, in my lifetime, I've always thought of fire as prevention. And the new word is prevention, putting out fires, and I understand the word now one uses, if one is sophisticated in these things, is suppression.
Yes.
And I love that word. And I know Chief Curran uses it a good deal. Fire department is pretty good shape. As I understand it, down the road we're going to need a replacement for the aerial ladder truck in the next, 4 or 5 years, maybe.
Yeah, although given the cost of those things, we may need to start setting money aside a lot sooner than that.
They're what, around 400,000 now, something like that?
I think they're over 500,000. They're unbelievably expensive. It's the only aerial ladder in the area, and of course able to reach multi-story buildings and with a college. And we don't have a lot of those in town, but there are some situations that it's quite useful. We may look at a lease option as opposed to purchase, and we may look at getting some assistance perhaps from some other entities involved. We're also continuing to negotiate with New Russia Township regarding the acquisition of a new pumper, where we are in need of a new pumper truck.
Tanker too, isn't there? Is there a tanker connected with that in some way?
Yeah, I'm sorry, tanker truck.
Well, are they together? I mean, is it a pumper dash tanker, or is that safe to say? Or?
I think the terms are used sometimes in conjunction with one another.
It's not just a water hauler, it's something that can actually be used.
The pumper implies that it both carries the water and can deliver it.
But a tanker would be also have a much, now help me if I'm getting off into dangerous ground here, but as I understand it, a tanker is a large, much larger truck carrying water. And I've seen these where there was nothing except just carrying it, literally.
For remote locations,
yes,
where they're not
rural areas, yes.
Yes.
But now this, as I understood it, have understood in the past, was to be not only that, but have pumps attached also.
That is correct. It's going to be able to deliver water as well.
Okay, okay. So that'd be sort of a new thing for them.
Right. We have one now, but its condition is deteriorating rapidly. It's got a lot of rust problems, and we do need to replace that.
We have 775-1635 if you would like to say something to the city manager, ask questions, make comments. Let's go on to police. Anything you'd like to tell us on the police?
Yes, we're in the process now of trying to bring our manpower complement back up. We've had several openings due to a resignation and another situation. We've gone through the interviews and met recently with the Civil Service Commission. It's our hope in the relatively near future to be back up to full manpower levels. We've had some drug arrests working in conjunction with the County Drug Task Force, which we appreciate very much. We're going to continue to focus in that area, in that there's, unfortunately, it's becoming, in Oberlin, as in many other communities, not a rampant problem, but a problem that we don't have any tolerance for. And to the extent that it's here even a little bit, we want to address it. We're hopeful of continuing our foot and bike patrols, maybe even expanding on that. We've gotten some very positive comments about that, particularly from a community-oriented policing standpoint, that they're getting to know the officers a little bit better, thinking that in many cases they're actually more effective than being in a cruiser, and that they can, they're not quite as evident from a distance and appearing on a scene a little quieter way. But that's something I'd like to continue to do. Also, the sergeants have been conducting public meetings, and each sergeant is assigned a different quadrant of the city, and I'd like to congratulate them on the series of meetings that they've been conducting. I think they've done a super job. I've tried to attend as many of those as I could, and I think they've been very well received. Good turnouts, very surprising, which says a lot about the community. People are involved, people have a lot of questions, people would like to work with the police department, something that we certainly encourage.
And you're doing this in each section of the town,
yes,
gradually.
Yes, and keep an eye on the announcements in the media, cable, in the paper. We will announce it.
Do you do this in homes, or where do you do this?
They've tended to be in public meeting places. They've met at church in the southeast corner of town, well, and actually also the First Church, I think, Rust Church, and some other public locations.
Yes, I see.
But we're willing to meet on a smaller level on a block watch, from a block watch standpoint. If a resident would like to host a meeting in their home, invite some of their neighbors in, particularly if they've had some problems, we're more than willing to accommodate that.
Right. Let's move on to code administration. Anything you wish to tell us on that?
Yes. Recently, City Council actually has approved an application to the state for the establishment of a building department for the city of Oberlin. Our intent is to have a local certified building official available to work with property owners, primarily right now the rooming house end of it. Eventually we could be looking at commercial and apartment applications, but right now for rooming houses, in that we have a special enforcement campaign going on there. If we did this essentially for the convenience of the property owners, because otherwise they would have to go to Akron or to Columbus to stand in line, take a number, and probably face a less than sympathetic inspector at that level. I think here we've got an individual that could actually go out and visit sites, sit down with a property owner, answer all their questions. We're willing to meet, set up appointments on a one-on-one basis, or meet with groups. We're just trying to be as user-friendly in a process that we realize bears some expense and effort on the part of the property owners to come into code compliance.
If I might ask you at this point, are we talking now basically about fire codes?
Yes.
Or will he help in other areas?
This primarily is in the fire, primarily in the fire code. We will have at our disposal inspectors that can address electrical, plumbing, structural, other issues as well. And I think certainly even in the course of our inspections, if something else is obvious, we'll address that. But right now we're trying to bring the 46 rooming houses that we have, or at least those that currently don't come under compliance, help them as best as possible over the coming year. We've set a deadline tentatively now for June 30th that they meet our state and local city fire code provisions. This is fire escapes, hardwired smoke detectors, and just other provisions that are included.
And I've heard that the college is very supportive of this.
Yes, I've been very encouraged by Nancy Dye, president of Oberlin College, her response and that of her administration. The students in general, I think, have had some concerns in this area, not with every rooming house in town, but there's been some concern that perhaps these could be a little safer, in some cases a lot safer. The college stands behind us 110%. They're helping us in an area that's even more crucial, and that's the identification of rooming houses that aren't registered and thus have not been subject to inspections at all by the city, that may have no smoke detectors of any kind, not even ladders leading from windows. And it's our desire to identify as many of these as possible and bring them into compliance. Those truly are the most unsafe situations in town. We recognize that.
And that will be by contract. There won't be a person full-time in that.
That's correct. This is via a professional services contract. The official designation by the state for state certification will not come until probably January. Until that time, we serve in an advisory role. Anybody wants to pick up a hammer and start doing work on a rooming house, up until that time, we'll have to send them to the state. But in the meantime, in the planning process, which over the inclement weather months most of these folks will be in, we think that we can provide a real service by having a knowledgeable person available by appointment.
And he would go to these places if asked.
As needed. I think we're going to have some handouts that ought to answer probably 90% of the questions. Some folks we're anticipating won't have any need for an inspection at all, at least in terms of informing them as to what they need to do to comply. We, of course, will ultimately follow that up with an inspection once they have made the improvements to assure that they have complied, and then we're going to issue a clean license at that point. Up to this point, we've been issuing conditional licenses. We've not shut any of these homes down, but we've said that as long as they come into compliance within our time frames, we would allow them to operate, and they're in essence under orders.
All right, and we might just add that this person or his people will be working with our code administrator, with our fire chief, not removing them out of the picture at all.
Not at all.
This, but it's a team effort, in other words.
Yes, there's still a lot of authority that our fire chief, as the city's official fire official, has, and he'll be extremely involved. Matter of fact, we may set up the office for this contract employee in the fire department itself and avail them to the resources that are down there. In code administration, code enforcement in general, we want to continue the added emphasis that we've put on properties, property maintenance, folks not having the debris and the unregistered vehicles and dilapidated houses. We do try and steer people towards our CHIP housing program if the house is the issue. In many cases, we recognize that these are low-income folks, that it's a struggle to, and perhaps we could steer them towards some way to help them finance that. That's what the CHIP program is about. But in many cases, it's simply somebody who's let it go. We do have codes to enforce that are on the books. The city's also considering adopting in the near future, a new existing structure and property maintenance code, which would be a little bit more all-encompassing and allow Mr. Whitehead, our code enforcement administrator, a little more of a stronger hand in enforcing codes in neighborhoods.
Let's go to planning and economic development. Anything you'd like to tell us there?
Yeah. Well, in the economic development realm, we've had a resignation. David Cornicelli, our economic development officer, has moved on to a position out of the city. So what I've chosen to do is take the opportunity to meet with City Council. I'll be doing this in the near future. And I'd like to have some added input from Council regarding what area of emphasis Council would like to see the administration focus on for economic development. Examples could be industrial, which in our case, since we're pretty much built out in our industrial park, would involve some planning for some additional land acquisition. Housing, particularly affordable housing, which has been identified as a need in this community.
That's sort of a buzzword, isn't it? Affordable housing, yeah. If different people interpret it, there's a quotation there, and people
I think the housing market on either end of the spectrum is somewhat tight. The realtors and others have told me, and we'd like to look at some well developed proposals for where housing is involved, and try and tie in some of the things that are of interest to us, making sure they're compatible with the rest of the city, making sure that maybe some special thoughts given to energy efficiency and things like that that are compatible with Oberlin. Other areas are the downtown and retail, commercial, Chamber of Commerce type emphasis. And also, as I mentioned, energy. That's an area with the college has a very exciting project with its environmental center coming together. The city is doing some things, as I mentioned, in recycling that are somewhat innovative, and perhaps we can build on that and use that as a further enticement to both residential and industrial growth in the city.
Okay, in our last area, and this is about your last chance to call 775-1635 if you wish to speak to the city manager. Let's talk about budget, which I understand the city's about moving into the next, seems like you get one of these budgets done and you start planning for the next one.
Doing a 5-year budget would be nice, but annually is what's called for. Yes, we're active. My department heads are actively working, as is the city auditor, in preparing a budget submittal for council's consideration. Our first emphasis is on capital improvements and an update of the 5-year plan. We're looking forward to having some consultations with council, some further direction as we refine the wish lists as they come in from the departments, but also there'll be some public hearings, opportunities for the public to come down, and we would very much encourage folks to come and be a part of that process.
And those will be at City Hall to be announced?
Yes, to be announced.
To be announced in the future.
We anticipate those would be a little bit later in the fall, late October, November, somewhere in that area.
Rob, share with us what the total budget of the city is, approximately.
Well, we're into essentially $8 million that we have in operating. We also have our enterprise funds, in some cases several million dollars each. The electric plant, we have the waste treatment and water utility funds. We also have refuse to set up as a separate enterprise fund. The idea of an enterprise fund is that revenues that are raised don't go into the general fund for general subsidy of other program areas, but are reinvested in the service that's being provided. In the case of the water and wastewater plant, those will go towards either direct acquisition of things that need to be purchased, or perhaps debt service on for major projects. This project that we're doing, $1,200,000 at the waste treatment plant this year, we're going to be looking at some notes, and there's going to be amortization of that, utilizing funds that have been raised through the rate structure.
So what would the total of all of this be to run the city? We're talking, what, about 15 million?
If you include all of the enterprise funds, I think you're in the right neighborhood.
Somewhere, give or take $1 million,
well,
as they say.
if you just looked at the budget requests I have right now, it's somewhere around 30 million. But that's obviously going to have to be pared back. And Kelly and I will be working diligently on that. I know there's a lot of anxiousness, if not anxiety, on the part of council to see some of the requests that the administration and the city auditor are going to come forth with this year. A lot of projects that will be competing for dollars, and everything from recreation to infrastructure. And we're going to try and keep in mind at all times just the best interest of the city, covering the bases of the basic services that we need to provide: police, fire, streets, and the utilities. And beyond that, we'll try and make the best proposals that we can in the discretionary areas.
Is there anything else? We've gone through these areas, and we certainly have now a pretty good idea of the broad range of things that we cover in a city. Most of us, I think, are not that much aware about. Anything final that you would like to say? Any final remarks?
Well, I'd always like to take the opportunity to invite folks to consider serving on a city board or commission. We have a good number of those. There are actually some vacancies that are existing now, and we will make a special effort in the near future to advertise exactly what those are, what the terms are, rather than me trying to remember all of those now. I would rather get that out to the media. But this really brings some fresh blood, some fresh ideas to the process. It's exciting for us to meet and work excuse me, with other members of the community, and it certainly serves to it's certainly staff that we don't have to hire. We've had a lot of expertise brought through this process, and that's something I think there's a lot of civic mindedness in this community, and I've seen a lot of evidence of that. But there's a lot of folks too that haven't served, and we're more than glad to look at some new faces across the table.
I believe I'm correct that when the charter was discussed and planned and then put into effect in the 50s, that rather than have council committees, they went toward the commission, which would involve many, many citizens.
Yeah.
And I think that's paid off. Some people know about, excuse me, I'm overcome with emotion when I think about the commission. Everybody knows about, I suppose, zoning board and planning, civil service, but there are others also that are out there that could use certainly some assistance. Well, Rob, we thank you so very much, and we must have a very contented electorate out there because you've got no calls. And I want to present to you one of our mugs, our Conversation with Lothrop mug, which we give to our guests, and we are very pleased you could be with us, and thank you so very much for being with us, not once but twice.
I consider myself mugged now.
Mugged now.
Thank you.
Next month, which I believe is October, we've discovered that Thursday is, the last Thursday will be Halloween, and so we're going to steer away from that, and I believe do it on the 24th. I think that our next program, I think that's the Thursday before. So at that time we will have another interesting guest on Conversations with Lothrop. Thanks so much for joining us, and good night.